It's a new year and a new administration for President Barack Obama. We recently learned he would be making some big changes. A new Secretary of Defense, Chuck Hagel, is on the way out. The new appointee, Ashton Carter. As we start to see significant changes on the geopolitical landscape, it looks like Carter will have his hands full. And joining us now is the editor of the August forecast, Patrick Wood. Patrick, thanks for joining us.
Hi, Gary. Nice to be here. Thank you.
Patrick, first of all, tell us a little bit about your work, the August Review, and your connection to the Trilateral Commission.
Well, I'm not a member, for one. I've been studying the Trilateral Commission since the late 1970s, written 2 books about it, Trilaterals over Washington, published a newsletter about it called the Trilateral Observer, and have researched and spoken extensively about the Trilateral Commission, its members, its policies, and its activities around the world.
Now,
for over 40 years now.
What is the connection that Ashton Carter has to the commission?
Well, he's a member of the Trilateral Commission. And remember, this is a group that was started back in 1973, specifically to create or to foster, as they said, a new economic world order. And this is pretty much exactly what they've done around the world, in Asia, in Europe, and in the United States as well. They've knitted the world together in a way that suited them according to their pattern of things. And we see their domination in politics all around the world today. But it's not really about politics, it's about economics.
Now, there's some big names on the Trilateral Commission, the Rockefellers, Kobayashis, lots of powerful people. What is the explicit purpose of the group, and how does Ashton Carter tie in, especially with his new role?
Well, they originally set out to create a new international economic order. That was in their literature over and over and over again. And
backtrack. What is a new economic order?
Well, this is the $64 question. Back in the 70s, my co-author and researcher, Anthony Sutton, and I sort of thought that it was maybe just rearranging Keynesianism to suit their purposes. In other words, game the system so they can get more money out. And that was a good theory at the time, but it wasn't adequate in a lot of ways. And I later found out, after studying different things over the years, I ran across the subject of technocracy, historic technocracy from the 1930s. And I quickly realized that what the Trilateral Commission really meant by new was brand new. I personally believe very strongly that they're intending to implement a system of technocracy on the global economy, which would essentially replace capitalism in total in the end. It hasn't yet, but it's moving in that direction. And we see the so-called green economy emerging. The United Nations defines that as a decoupling of resource use from economic growth, which is an oxymoron. But the whole green movement, the whole sustainable development movement around the world, driven by climate change and other things like that, the eco movement, all of these things are tied to environmental policy, which is part and parcel of technocracy.
Now, how does Ashton Carter play into that green movement, the sustainability movement? I do know that the Pentagon has recently said global warming is a threat, so there must be a tie-in somewhere.
Well, it absolutely is, and it's not. All of these people don't necessarily march in lockstep. I don't want to imply that. It's not exactly true. But Ashton Carter is himself not only a member of the Trilateral Commission, but he really fits the model of a consummate technocrat. He has a PhD in theoretical physics from I can't remember where it's from. It's from MIT, one of the big universities. Guy's a genius. He really is. But he never practiced his education. He went into the defense world back after his early career, and he's been in it ever since. And so with an advanced scientific degree, no military experience per se, he fits the model of a technocrat who wants to apply his engineering and physics disciplines, if you will, to an area of society that's very important to us. That is defense, defending the United States and so on. And just as a side note to that, there has been a lot of rumbling that Congress actually passed a law. I'm trying to think, probably a month or two ago, stating that the Department of Defense cannot use public funds to promote climate change. Which is interesting, it was just kind of a footnote in a bill. And I'm thinking, okay, so Congress is kind of wise to what the Defense Department wants to do in the first place. They blocked them by defunding it. And now all of a sudden we see Ashton Carter show up on the scene, if you will, to take control of the situation, perhaps. And
so do you believe that this is a coincidence that he was appointed?
Absolutely not a coincidence. When these people show up on the scene, it's never a coincidence. And as I mentioned in the article that I recently wrote about Ashton Carter and the Trilateral Commission in general, there are probably about 25 or 30 United States members of the Trilateral Commission that would hail from the Democrat side of the political spectrum, and Obama has used over 90% of them at one time or another in his current administration. That's so far beyond coincidence. It's not even funny, Gary. It's just amazing. It's a revolving door, is what it is, and they're just absolutely dominating certain parts of our government. And by the way, they have since Jimmy Carter. Jimmy Carter started this whole thing back in 1976. So
how are they steering the U.S. agenda towards the Trilateral Commission agenda if that's what's happening?
Well, we've seen their fingerprints, Gary, all over the Sustainable Development Movement, and not only in the United States, but also abroad as well. And remember, this is an international organization. This is not just limited to the United States. It's not like the Council on Foreign Relations, for instance, which is primarily North America. But they've had an undue influence on global policy for 40 years now. And just as an example, the so-called Rio Conference in 1992, which produced the document Agenda 21 and really kickstarted sustainable development, that conference was made possible by a United Nations committee that had met previously in 1987 called the Brundtland Commission. They produced a book called Our Common Future. It was primarily edited by a lady by the name of Gro Brundtland from Europe. And she was an environmentalist, a former prime minister, and she was a member of the Trilateral Commission, Gary. And she was the one, that book and her work is credited by the United Nations itself as being the inspiration for the 1992 meeting, the so-called Earth Charter that produced the document Agenda 21 that brought us sustainable development today. Their fingerprints are all over it, Gary.
Now, President Obama says Chuck Hagel is actually doing a fine job, but that they decided to move on and find someone who fit their future better. From what we're seeing in Pakistan, Iraq, Syria, and now the latest developments in Cuba, what kind of future do you think President Obama has in mind?
It's pretty scary, I think, right now, Gary. My biggest concern with a lame duck Congress now and with him not having a majority is that that he may well try to adopt something comparable to a scorched earth policy where he'll just truly become rogue until somebody tries to set on him and stop him, physically from doing what he's doing. I cannot imagine that, but, it's just so foreign to America to think about those sort of things. But nevertheless, if things heat up in the military, where, generals and colonels and so on are talking against the president openly now, it's almost to the point of rebellion. We all know there's been a purge of top military brass in the past 3 years now. And, you just wonder if maybe the president is not fearing some kind of a military resistance to his leadership. That could be definitively headed off, of course, with somebody like Ashton Carter, who is a member of the Trilateral Commission, a team player, and part of the group that's driving Obama in the first place. And I personally think we make a mistake believing that Obama is in charge of his own destiny, his own policies. I think he's being controlled very minutely by these people, these members of the Trilateral Commission around him. And some of those, for instance, include people like Susan Rice. Susan Rice was National Security Advisor. Zbigniew Brzezinski played that role with Jimmy Carter back in the 70s. And so, Susan Rice is the person that's feeding Obama everything he sees on a daily basis. That's her job. And, the Trilateral Commission members have dominated the National Security Advisor. The Director of National Intelligence has been a member. Many people in the State Department, high levels in the State Department, have been members of the Trilateral Commission. They're the ones telling Carter what to do or telling Obama what to do. It's not the other way around.
Now, what about the Senate and the president? They seem to be getting along a lot better right now than they have in the past. Do you expect to see more of a falling out under the new Congress in January?
I do. And there's going to be a lot of rhetoric and a lot of hoopla. But at this point, most of the strategic points that the conservatives had, that they were looking forward to in January, have been removed by the Speaker of the House by passing this spending bill for the next year. And because it wasn't a temporary spending bill, but rather a full-blown spending bill, there's no opportunity at this point to defund Obamacare, for instance, to defund the immigration, the president's immigration policy right now. And this has a lot of conservatives absolutely furious, Gary. I don't blame him. It makes me upset too. This man has sunk our ship before we even got out of dock. And so stuff like that, the political games that are being played, they're going to create a lot of rhetoric. But at this point, can they create any we'll just have to wait and see if they can actually get any traction.
Now, Patrick, we went to the website for the Trilateral Commission. They post a lot of news articles and press releases about their members, but we didn't see anything posted on their website about Carter's nomination as one of the most powerful men in the world. Why do you think they didn't post anything?
It's just, certainly it's not oversight. The only reason, they've always downplayed their importance, their self-importance. They're very good at that. They just don't really toot their own horn. They don't need to, I might add. And we've heard this argument, or I have now, because Professor Sutton has passed in 1992. I've heard the argument for decades that well, we're just a bunch of guys, we're just, we try and associate with some of the best qualified people for, doing this and that. And aw shucks, we're just trying to help the country out. Well, it doesn't fly. When you look at the list of people who have been members of the commission over the years and who are in and out of government like a revolving door, so I'm sorry that this does not fly. There's 300 plus million people in this country that could potentially fill any given position, and you can't tell me that there aren't other people that are qualified to be in our government. We're supposed to be a government of the people, by the people, and for the people, not of the Trilateral Commission, by the Trilateral Commission, and for the Trilateral Commission. I'm sorry, it just does not fly. And the fact that Carter would be picked out of this whole, swimming pool, if you will, of people, that's not coincidence. He's stepping in to take control over a situation that they feel that he can do better than anybody else and protect their own interests.
All right, Patrick. Once again, thanks for joining us on WHDT.
You're welcome.
All right, that was Patrick Wood. He is the editor of the August Review and the August Forecast. You can check him out at AugustReview.com. Up next, we've got more news. We'll be right back.